I figured the first thing we will talk about is the most entertaining story that happened this week. And it, of course, involves Speaker Mike Johnson. It has to. How could it not? Because there was a video that started circulating last week. It's actually a year old, but the clip is when Mike Johnson was speaking as a congressperson to a church last year, and it was a panel on technology and how Christians ought to deal with technology. And Mike Johnson made some very weird comments about a particular way he was making sure his kids were on the right track and that they weren't looking at anything they weren't supposed to be looking at. So I'm going to play this clip for you first, and then we're going to talk all about it. Just to give you a little background here, this is a War on Technology panel from October of 2022. This is at Cypress Baptist Church in Benton, Louisiana. And at the time, of course, Mike Johnson was just a congressperson, not the Speaker of the House, which he is now, a role that should horrify everybody. Okay, here's the clip. Then we'll talk about it. I'm gonna might inject myself into the corner here, but here we go.
Questions. The first thing I want to talk about, I want to actually talk to you for a second. Is that okay?
Sure.
This is Mike Johnson, and many of you know him, but Clint's given us some useful tools tonight, obviously, and today these tools are given to us to assist parents and to all of us so that we can win this battle. But one of the best things is what we're going to talk about in just a moment is Covenant Eyes. Yeah. And you've personally had some personal experience with Covenant Eyes within your home. And so why is that such an effective tool? Why do parents need to put this into their home?
Yeah, that's great question. We probably could have called this more appropriately a war on the darkness of technology, because there are some good things with technology, of course. I mean, you know, the Bible apps we all love, we broadcast our services, you know, on our social media, and there's some very positive things, but there's also, as Clint's pointed out aptly, some really dark things. So Covenant Eyes is the software that we've been using a long time in our household. I first learned about it at, I think, a Promise Keepers event in the early 2000s. I think it was developed in about the year 2000. But it's the largest accountability software that there is, and there's some paperwork out there on the table that I think everybody may have picked up on the way in. If not, go get it. It's a subscription-based. I mean, we don't make any money on this. I'm telling you, we use it. Okay, I'm endorsing it because I'm a user. It's about $15 a month, $16 a month, something like that. And you get up to 10 devices. And what it is accountability software. So men in a church, you know, men's Bible study groups will do it. That's how it's presented at Promise Keepers. But they also mention, hey, when your kids become teenagers, especially if you have boys, dads, they're talking to the guys at this event, you might want to think about doing this with your sons. And so we've been doing that. And so what it does real simply is it has an algorithm and software. It's way above my head how it works, but it scans. You obviously opt into it, but it scans all the activity on your phone or your devices, your laptop, tablet, what have you. We do all of it. And then it sends a report to your accountability partner. So my accountability partner right now is Jack, my son, right? And so he's 17. So he and I get a report of all the things that are on our phones or all of our devices once a week. If anything objectionable comes up, your accountability partner gets an immediate notice. I'm proud to tell you my son he's got a clean slate, all right? Yeah. But we get a report.
I'm going to stop it there because ew, weird, creepy. As many people said online, why do Republicans keep failing the normal people test? But yeah, he was talking about Covenant Eyes, basically a Christian shameware software where, like he said, it scans everything you do online. And if anything objectionable pops up, and we'll talk about what objectionable means in a second, then it sends a report to whoever is on your list, whoever your accountability partner is, or maybe there are more than one. And like Mike Johnson said, his accountability partner is his son, Jack, who's 17, and vice versa. So he finds out what his son was looking at or viewing or doing online just so we can keep tabs on him. And he says at the end, I'm proud to tell you my son has got a clean slate, which, ew. And also, man, of all the ways for a father and son to bond, it shouldn't be over finding out what type of porn the other is watching. That is creepy. By the way, that clip is from a sermon series that was online for the past year from that church. But as soon as that clip started going viral, two things happened real quick. A lot of Christians were saying that clip was taken out of context and it paints an unfair picture of Mike Johnson. And the church took that video down from YouTube, which is weird because if you want to show people that it's totally normal in context, you leave the full thing up. They did not. That's unusual. But let's talk about covenant eyes and all of this because, listen, I'm going to go ahead and admit I do understand that parents might want to know what their kids are doing online, especially today, especially it's not just that they might be looking at adult content online, it's that I worry they might be talking to people and they don't realize that they're talking to older people. Maybe they're being told to do weird things online. I don't know. There's a lot of scummy people online. So I do understand the instinct of why Mike Johnson would want to say, I want to know what my son is doing online, even though his concern is he might be looking at adult content. But covenant eyes specifically is a weird thing. And I'm going to share with you this image that appeared in Wired magazine last year because they did a whole article about the ungodly surveillance of anti-porn shameware apps. And the thing worth mentioning in this article, it's really long. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I want to share with you a couple things because notice what one person said about this thing. Brit, this former user of it, she wasn't using Covenant Eyes. She was using a similar program. But look at this. It's really not about pornography, says Brit, a former user of Accountable to You, who asked to only be identified by her first name due to privacy concerns. It's about making you conform to what your pastor wants, Brit says. Brit says she was asked to install the app by her parents after she was caught looking at pornography, and that her mother and her pastor were both her designated accountability partners. Wait for it. I remember I had to sit down and have a conversation with the pastor after I Wikipedia'd an article about atheism, she says. I was a kid, but that doesn't mean I don't have some kind of right to read what I want to read. So, in that situation, that girl was told, oh, you were trying to learn about atheism? Well, I'm glad the software told us what you were doing because that sort of curiosity is not allowed in our home. By the way, that same article actually had another section where a church member said that the pastor of this guy was an employee of the church. He said the pastor used that sort of software to spy on everything the staff did online. Like every staffer had to get that software installed, and the pastor, the lead pastor, was their accountability partner. So he could see what Amazon purchases they made, what articles they read, and even who they looked up on Instagram. Like that's how much of a big brother situation this was. And as the Wired magazine pointed out, Covenant Eyes specifically had been downloaded over 100,000 times. So one of the reactions I heard after this Rolling Stone article came out, kind of highlighting what Mike Johnson said, there were so many Christians saying, this is not a weird thing in our circles because everyone in our church knows about programs like Covenant Eyes. This sort of nanny bot software is so normal in our circles. So that's interesting. I will say, like, it's one thing if you believe you have a problem, some addiction, maybe you have a porn addiction, and you want an accountability partner. You know what? Fine. This software is designed to do just that. It can work in those situations, and that's not a weird thing at all. I mean, the same thing can be true of people who are working to get through alcohol addiction. They might want to know I have someone who's going to be there for me. I can call them up when I have a craving, and they're going to stop me from doing this thing that I need to stop doing. That's fine. But if your church believes you need a nanny because you are curious about atheism or sex or anything else, you're in danger and you probably belong to a cult. So that's a weird thing. By the way, this is from Mike Johnson, who last week we talked about is a fan of covenant marriages. He really likes covenant everything. Covenant marriages, of course, makes it harder to get divorced, even if you're not in love. Let me bring up, I guess, three things about covenant eyes that I think all of you, if you are thinking about this, talking about this, three things you should know, okay? The first is that it's not even effective all the time. Do you all remember Josh Duggar? Let me share this with you here. Do you remember Josh Duggar? He was sentenced to over 12 years in prison last year. Why? Because he was caught downloading illicit content involving children, if you get my drift. So that's what Josh Duggar did. Well, guess what? Covenant Eyes specifically was installed on his computer and his phone and everything else. Josh Duggar had Covenant Eyes. Well, apparently it didn't work. In fact, what we learned during his trial last year is that he installed a Linux partition that basically allowed him to use his computer in a way that wasn't seen by Covenant Eyes. So the software didn't catch any of the, naughty stuff he might have been looking at, much less the illegal stuff we now know he was looking at. And while we're on the same page, if Mike Johnson, who is now the Speaker of the House, is using Covenant Eyes, that means that some third party software or server somewhere is keeping track of everything he's doing on his computer so that they could send objectionable stuff to his son. Is it safe that the Speaker of the House's computer is being watched and scanned by some third party software that we don't know much about, that might not be secure? I feel like Hillary Clinton got much more crap for doing something far more secure. And yet there's Mike Johnson just saying, like, yeah, Covenant Eyes, come look at my computer. Nothing classified to see here. So that's messed up. Another thing that is weird is that Mike Johnson's son is his accountability partner. Like, it totally makes sense in this Christian world that Mike Johnson would be his son's accountability partner. It makes sense that a father wants to know what his son is looking at. I do get that. I think it's weird and creepy, but I get that. And the congressman made it sound like the mutual oversight between his son and himself, that was a way to show he is practicing what he's preaching. But still, his accountability partner should be his wife or his pastor or maybe some elder at his church. It should not be the 17-year-old child who lives in his house. Can you even imagine, what if Mike Johnson is looking at porn? What if he's looking at very specific kinds of porn and his son gets a readout of the videos? I feel like that's not about accountability anymore. That's traumatizing to the kid. That's a weird thing to put your kid through. And again, Mike Johnson is probably saying, well, my kid doesn't have anything to worry about because I'm not watching anything. But if other Christians follow the advice he was offering during that event, that very well could happen, and that would be messed up. So don't have your kid be your accountability partner. That sort of burden should never be placed on a child. And here's the last thing. I'm not going to play this for you, but this was in the clip for the 1 minute after he said that his son has a clean slate. He said that he actually did get a report about his son and that the Covenant Eye software sent him a blurred picture that his son had been caught looking at, and it had two women in it, and it was marked as questionable. And so what did Mike Johnson do? Well, he sees the two women in the picture, and he's like, I'm going to unblur this picture to see what my son was looking at. And guess what it was? It wasn't anything naughty. He actually says in that clip, it's two middle-aged teachers talking. My son was in the Bossier youth leadership thing, and so he was having a dialogue as a group with these women. But, he says, Covenant Eyes caught it because here's two women talking to my son, right? And he says this like Covenant Eyes did a good thing. It caught his son looking on screen at two women, and so the software said, uh-oh, two women on screen. We know what that could mean. And it sent Mike Johnson a report saying, oh, your son's doing something naughty. But as Mike Johnson admits, no, his son was like on a Zoom call with other teachers as part of a youth group. So this was a professional setting. and two women were on camera talking, and Covenant Eyes flagged it as possibly objectionable. And that should bother everybody because that's not just a false positive. That's saying, if two women are talking about anything, that might not be okay. That's how this software works. And think about what that means. Like, you all remember Mike Pence was a big practitioner of what's called the Billy Graham rule. Mike Pence said repeatedly he avoids being alone in a room with anyone who's not his wife, with a woman who is not his wife. Why? Because the optics are bad for him, because it could lead to infidelity, as if Mike Pence doesn't know how to keep it in his pants. And because he wants to avoid false allegations. The best way to avoid false allegations is to avoid being around women who are not your wife. And that's a problem because, like, there are stories of women who needed to get a ride back somewhere late at night, and they call their Christian male friend up, hey, can you give me a ride? And the answer is, no, I cannot, because I'm a good Christian man. Have fun walking home by yourself, ladies. So, okay, Billy Graham rule is messed up. But one of the reasons that's such a messed up rule is because for Mike Pence, think about what that means for other women. He's in a position of power and he's saying, well, I can't be alone with other women in a professional capacity, even though those women may have worked really hard to attain similar positions of power. They treated men like Mike Pence treated working relationships like possible personal ones, implying that sex is always possibly on the table. So Mike Johnson's son was talking to two women professionally, but what's the lesson that he's going to learn because that was flagged as possibly questionable? The lesson he's going to learn is you are better off avoiding these situations, even if they're innocuous, even if they're perfectly appropriate. Just work with other men. That's the solution to everything. Better to just deal with men than to talk to two women professionally because they're good at what they do. Because, I don't know, some weird software nanny app might think you're looking at porn. That's messed up. Like, how immature do you have to be that you're unable to deal with that situation? That's why I think the software is so laughable. It's not just that there are ways around the code that monitors what you're doing, no matter how bad it is. It's that it also creates new problems when none existed. So I guess the Christians like Mike Johnson who use Covenant Eyes think they need to be babysat because they might use the internet like a lot of other people. But also it shows you what type of controlling and harmful environment, Christian environment, Mike Johnson lives in. And now, if Trump becomes president again and the Senate flips and the Republicans maintain the House, what do you think Mike Johnson's going to do? He's going to want to nanny bot everybody because there's nothing conservative Christians like more than invading everybody else's private relationships and telling them we know what's best for you and we will codify that into law if we need to. So Covenant Eyes is weird and messed up and creepy as hell, but if it gets people talking about how messed up that conservative Christian purity culture is, I guess, yay, silver lining.